So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/Real ID. That's tsa.gov/Real ID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.
The Rev and the Rabbi. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, we're discussing what it means to be religious and how really interlaps or interfaces with society today. And you had a point during the break.
It's important because people say, let's get a religion. There's a very famous song by John Lennon that talks about the absence of religion as though it's the cause for war, conflict, instead of looking at it as people's greed and lust for power and personal agendas, religion, to push those agendas. But the reality is that there is what is called the moral system within society. And the moral system within society is composed of 3 pillars: religion, education, and philanthropy. And religion is important because it provides a transcendent moral framework, right and wrong, grounded not just in social norms, but in transcendent truths, eternal truths, things that we can agree on. Because the moral relativist says, well, we decide individually, or culture decides what's right and wrong. But when we ask the question, well, is slavery right or wrong? Sometimes or all the time. Is Nazi Germany and its actions against Jews right and wrong some of the time or all of the time? Because if we say it's all of the time, then we're now talking about objective, absolute moral truths and moral convictions. Rabbi, your response?
Look, no, I think that's an excellent point, that there are foundational truths which apply in all situations. There is no justification for what the Nazis did, none whatsoever. If you look at, our respective traditions, it teaches us, thou shalt not murder. You don't just kill people because you don't like them, because you blame them for something that you feel has been injurious to your welfare, and now you kill an entire people. It's wrong. And I think this relative kind of, it's wrong for you, but not wrong for me.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Because it's relative. You're making those decisions on your own. There has to be a transcendent authority. Go ahead, Rabbi.
So Germans would say, when asked, well, why did you do some of those things? The Nazis, well, they were the Jews, a subhuman category, that when you have that kind of a very flawed moral system, you can make these equations. Well, it was only the Jews. It was only the blacks. They're less than we are. We have a right to do whatever we want because they're inferior to us. That's the problem with, this kind of moral relativism, which to me is immoral.
Yeah. It allows for social constructs to dictate what's right or wrong, but more importantly, the value of people. I mean, you understand, as a person of color, I'm relating to the history here in the United States of slavery and Jim Crow and segregation. the disenfranchisement, discrimination against people of color, and others along the way. So morality and religion, should I say, brings a transcendent moral framework, which is
Mm.
critical. And it's great that we're having this conversation, Rabbi, because when the moral system in a society collapses, the society collapses. And I think it begins with religion, because the three pillars of the moral system is religion, education,
Hmm.
and philanthropy.
Right.
So even with education, because in education ideally should reinforce moral understanding by cultivating virtue, critical thinking, civic responsibility, not just job skills. And somewhere along the line, we've allowed our educational system, which is one of the moral pillars, to lose track of the importance of character, the inner
Right.
person,
Right.
and the building of that inner person.
I
Yeah.
I don't have conversations with some people about character or integrity because they feel, you got to be pragmatic. Start with the idealism. You got to get things done. Person is very flawed. As long as he gets it done, it doesn't matter.
Ah,
Where am I going with that conversation? Where am I going? You
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Exactly.
By the way, I want to ask you something else because we're time limited. Is that when the Israelites were, presented with the Torah during the act during Revelation, it says they stood at a distance, and I've read a number of articles about that. The danger of standing at a distance. They were afraid. It was a dramatic moment, but they stood back. And I think what Shavuot Pentecost says to both of us, both of our traditions and all traditions, you can't stand at a distance when you see wrongs being committed. You can't be religious and somehow turn your back on the pain of society.
Isn't that why we stood together at that press conference?
We
You
stood to,
know,
yep. What was the about
I'm just saying,
anti-Semitism?
yeah.
The attack, right? The deaths of those two young people in Washington, and we've stood at other press conferences, addressing the wrongs, and we get heat sometimes because you stood there. Did you see who else was standing there? And I said to people when I respond to it, very often I don't. I say, well, I'm there for the cause. So do you want me not to be there for the cause because you don't like a certain individual? How does that better the cause when you refuse to stand at a moment when people are coming together and saying we condemn anti-Semitism? We will not be
You,
silent. But you stood next to somebody.
yeah,
That to
yeah,
me,
yeah.
that's not a constructive conversation.
I think we lose focus on what's really, really important. In my remarks, I mentioned that there are those who judge our unity and judge our friendship. Uh, and we still have to keep going beyond those judgments, because no one, especially if you're a minority population
Mm.
within a society, you can't do it on your own. You can't give enough votes by yourself, by your own community, to change legislation, to change policy, right? You can't get enough support to stand in opposition to things that are detrimental. You have to join forces. That's a reality of life.
One of the great memories I have is on a regular basis, I would have lunch with Ed Koch when he was no longer mayor. And even though he wasn't, at that point at City Hall, he was recognized. You couldn't have lunch with Ed Koch without people coming over and say, thank you, Mayor, for what you did. But one of the things he would say in our conversations is there are people I stood with who weren't that popular in certain circles, but they were willing to stand with me when I needed them. And he said, Joe, we need allies. We, the
Yeah,
Jewish people, need allies. We don't have enough. We can't do it on
yeah,
our own. We can't fight anti-Semitism by ourselves. We need other standing. Because if we think we're that strong, as you said, we don't have the votes.
mhm,
And by the way, religion requires us to find people who believe in the cause.
right.
Even sometimes when we say, I disapprove of some of that behavior of that individual, but at the end of the day, I need that individual to shout with me. Otherwise, I'm shouting alone.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
Absolutely. And I know our segments are timed, but we have to deal with the last pillar. There's religion, education. This is the moral system, religion, education, and philanthropy. Because philanthropy expresses voluntary compassion and social responsibility. People helping others, people seeing a need, not by force, but by conscience. And when a society loses its conscience, loses its compassion, when we suffer from a deficiency of empathy, which is some of the things that we're suffering from in this nation right now, you know, the civil society begins to deteriorate. And, we lose the importance of free and self-governing people to do what is right. The moral system is critical to society.
So we come to the end of the segment. I just want to say I learned years ago, when we arrive in heaven, God wants to see receipts. You can't bring your checkbook. Look back and say, what did you do? What did you give, right? You got to have the receipts. You can't just say, well, I'll do it now. Too late. So we both believe the importance of giving to others, the importance of philanthropy, because people are desperate very often for our strength and support. Rev, thank you.
Absolutely.
This has been a great conversation.
Great conversation. So we got to go to a break.
Yeah, and when we come back,
come back. Yeah.
The former governor of the state of New York, David Paterson. Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
We are the 55th governor of the state of New York, the Honorable David A. Paterson. Governor Paterson, I very much appreciate, and the word that was recurrent was community. As I remember Charles Rangel, as I remember some of the leaders during that period, they stood up for their community. And I stress that because I have to say, as a member of the Jewish people, I shocked, even ashamed by those from my community who take public and don't really care, or they're not strong when it comes to their community. I see the position on Israel and anti-Semitism. A number of them, they'll mouth the word, "Oh, I'm against I'm anti-anti-Semitism." Oh, that's courageous. I stand. Israel is a friend. Oh, that's courageous. But in terms of making the particular decisions, in terms of standing with the people, very often they're missing. Or as we said in our earlier segment, there are people who stand at a distance. Charles Rangel, your father, Percy Sutton, right, and all of the others, they never lost sight of Lenox Avenue. They never lost sight of the people and proudly stood up for their people. And I wish we see more of that today.
That's fascinating, Rabbi, because there were some times, even when I went to Albany, and I got there in 1985, where I saw members of my community, and I don't mean just the Harlem or greater Harlem area, but Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and Brooklyn, and Bedford-Stuyvesant parts of Brooklyn, and South Jamaica and Southeast Queens. You had these people, they had elected positions, they had a vote. Sometimes they weren't going to win, but they would choose to vote with a majority, which was not supporting a lot of the issues, and this was a comfort zone. And then you would hear other people in that majority refer to them as brave and strong and courageous, because they wanted them to go against their community. That's what these leaders didn't understand. And I would assume that there's something similar in that intellectual discussion in the Jewish community, where people don't want to hear you mouth the words. They want to see you perform the resistance that is needed to really try to disrupt anti-Semitism. And I'll leave to you to determine who has been able to do that and who hasn't.
But
what I would say is it is a common problem in both the black and Jewish communities.
Yeah. I look at the college campus situation, and I remember being there, being at Columbia and talking to some of the students there, talking to students on some of the campus of City University. One of the things that came across was, where are the political leaders? Why aren't they here? Why don't they, stand, walk with us to the class, see what we have to endure to get to our classes? They're missing, many of them. And you said before, showing up. Well, if you don't show up for your people, to me, you have deserted your people and don't deserve the support of your people. So that's one of the questions I ask. And very often you find if you're good for your community, you're good for other communities as well. Rev?
No, it's true. I think about the principle of priority to universality. Charity begins at home. That is part of the law of Moses. It's part of our Christian tradition. That you have to secure home, because if that foundation is not secured, doesn't matter if you're running around the world doing great things. You're judged locally first, and I think that's very, very important.
Yeah.
And if you are locally first, it gives you a kind of dynamic that you can go and march for relief in other communities.
Right.
And people will respect you because they know that you're respected in your own community. Now you're coming to visit and see if you can be of any help to them.
Right.
And it goes a long way. So really, if you wanted to be a star who was recognized everywhere, as you said, Reverend, you should start at home. That's where you start.
But why is it that elected officials lose sight of that they're not there for their community, and they couldn't have got to where they are without the community? How do you lose that, commitment, which was so important to get you where you are?
I think elected officials, not all, but a good number, are afraid to be attacked. They're afraid for anyone to speak against them. So the best way to avoid criticism isn't to say anything at all, or not do anything that would, enhance criticism. Now, I had a completely different point of view. I felt once I was getting criticized that I was being heard, and that the critics could, try to put me in my place, but the overall community heard what I was saying. And I think you've got to be willing to take that sometimes, and you've got to be willing to, recognize what is, what's important to your community, and often, you're going to be met with, acrimony and that's but that's part of being a leader. That you put yourself right in the middle of trouble, not standing around waiting to see who wins the particular battle and getting on their side.
Well, you just gave the formula for these influencers and shock jocks to become great and develop a following. Say something that some people want to hear and some people don't want to hear. And you put yourself in the middle of it, and all of a sudden, they're both listening.
Yeah.
One will love to hate you, and the others will love to hear what you have to say because you're saying something constructive.
They say a rabbi who doesn't receive criticism is not a rabbi. We learned that when we graduated school. Get out there, say what needs to be said. You have a responsibility. And I think when you looked for that popular appeal, you always look to be popular rather than being principled, you're going to lose that battle eventually. People see through that. They see you're plastic. Even though there was a good line in The Graduate, plastics, that's the reason for success. If you're plastic and adapt to any situation without standing firm, you're not a respected, or you don't deserve the respect of the people.
And that's true of life. If I may quote from the Hebrew scriptures
Please.
For a moment, Governor. There's a wonderful
Why,
proverb that
certainly.
says, a wonderful proverb that says, beware when all men speak well of you. And that is so true. People come up to me and say, I've heard great things about you. I said, well, I hope you've heard a few bad things as well,
Yeah.
because something's
By,
wrong if
by the
if
way,
it's only good.
I I have a little story to tell the two of you about criticism. It's 1993, and I've decided, as a state senator, I'm going to run for this new position in city government called public advocate. I thought that was something I'd really like to be. And I have a press conference at City Hall. And as you both know, the steps at City Hall. So we're at the top of the steps of City Hall, and I'm getting ready to speak. And a woman who happened to be African American is at the bottom. She's walking past, and she says, David Paterson, shut up, you cockeyed SOB. Oh, you blind cockeyed SOB.
Wow.
And so everyone there was stunned, like no one knew what to say. And Bob Lift, who was a reporter for Newsday, walked over to me and he said, Senator Patterson, I see your voter profile is going up.
Yeah. But it hurts, doesn't it? It hurts to receive the criticism, but you have to say to yourself, it's the price you pay for leadership. There was a line in a movie, when you assume leadership, you give up the right to be human. I mean, people hold you to a certain standard that sometimes is inhuman. But if you want to be a leader, take the credit. Moses was criticized during his period of leadership. It wasn't like every vote was positive, but he was a great leader.
That's a good one. That'll preach. I'm taking notes here. That's a good sermon right there.
Governor, we're going to conclude the program. Your dad was an impressive, important figure, and the fact that you're the son of that great person also confers upon you greatness, but you've also earned it through all that you've done during your life, and we want you to continue. Don't retire. Be relevant. Be part of the story. You are a great human being, and we are proud of you.
Absolutely.
Well,
so you can keep coming on the show.
After I heard the Reverend's statistic about retirement, believe me, I'm gonna die on a day I worked at the end of my life.
Yeah. What the 7 years? Watch out for those 7 years after retirement.
Watch out.
Yeah. Rev, thank you so much.
Ultimate 7-year itch.
Yeah.
You're out.
Great conversation, gentlemen. We hope you, our listeners, have enjoyed the conversation here. And we look to educate the mind, stir the heart, motivate the will with information and experience. Till next time, the Rev and the Rabbi right here. God bless.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.